Okay, welcome everyone. I think I'm going to get started. Welcome to the core argument workshop from question to claim. I'm your host, Jessica Deal. I'm a social behavioral scientist and an academic writing consultant. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. In the interest of keeping down background noises, please stay muted unless you're talking. Of course, then you can unmute yourself. The chat is available for you to put any questions or comments throughout the presentation. I will do my best to check this throughout and apologize, if there is anything urgent, that you go ahead and unmute yourself and just speak up. Um, that's fine to interrupt. That's relevant to what I'm talking about at the moment. There will be time for Q&A at the end, so keep that in mind. If you want to go ahead and share your city or country in the chat, that would be great. I'm in Denver in the USA. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? We're going to start with what a core argument is and why it matters. And then we're going to move into two prompts, both building on your argument, starting with your claim, your reason, and evidence behind it. Then we're going to move into prompts 3 and 4, which are about strengthening your argument, thinking about counter arguments, creating a warrant, and answering the all important so what. Finally, I'm going to talk about some next steps for you, and then we'll have a Q&A session. All right, before we get started, I just want to introduce myself because I may be new to you. So who am I? Here is a little bit about my background and my track record. I'm not going to read through this, but what I want to do is start by asking what I suspect, uh, and I suspect this could be why you're here. Do you have a research project sitting on your computer right now that you know should be published, but somehow just isn't getting there? Well, I get it. I've been there. So, a little bit about my background. After graduating from the University of Colorado, I ended up being hired at the National University of Singapore as an assistant professor in the School of Design and Environment. Mainly, they hired me because I had a publication track record, which previous hires had lacked, and they really needed tenurable faculty. Well, after 7 years at NUS, I was at a crossroads. So it was time for me to apply for tenure or step away. And while I loved teaching and I really loved research, I realized it was time to move back, and Denver was calling me back. So I took it as a good sign to realign my life goals with my passions, and I decided to officially leave academia. But I still write journal papers. In fact, I have two papers under final review right now, which I realize one of them is going on 6 months. So I better reach out to that editor and see what's happening. And I'm also sitting on an invitation to write and submit a new paper with an open access waiver from an MDPI journal. And so this is something that I'll be doing in the next month or two. I also review manuscripts regularly, generally one to maybe maximum three a month. And of course, I help others navigate their academic path. What I see among grad students, early career faculty, and even well established scientists is that getting published can be a huge hurdle. Too often, academics spend years entrenched in research, only to hit the publish or perish phase at the last minute. And that can create a culture of anxiety that can then turn into writing procrastination. I find it ironic that we're trained extensively to be rigorous scientists, but we're never actually taught how to write a journal paper. At least I wasn't. But guess what? It doesn't have to be that way. I'm a teacher, I'm a writer, and I'm a social scientist. And I'm here to help you develop tools and skills and confidence to get your research published. And that's what we're going to get on track with today. This workshop, excuse me, is really a first step towards that goal to get published. And we're going to address what I find is the most crucial missing piece of many of the manuscripts I review, and a main reason papers get rejected, and that's lacking a core argument. All right, just one more thing before we dive in. Now, you know a little bit about me. I want to make sure that you feel like you're in the right place. So, who are you? I suspect you align with one or more of these cases. For example, you might be an early career researcher, You finished data collection, but struggled to frame your research clearly and organize it into a publishable paper. Or you might be an interdisciplinary scholar. You work across disciplines or use qualitative mixed methods and need guidance in structuring complex, multifaceted research. Or you might be an overwhelmed grad student. You're juggling coursework, teaching, your thesis. You're not sure where to even start with turning your research into a journal paper. You might be a community based practitioner. You work outside traditional academia, such as an NGO, government agency, or are in consulting. But you want to publish your case studies, interventions, or practice based research. Or you might be a non native English speaker. You're brilliant at research, but writing for English language journals feels like an extra hurdle, and you need strategies that work for you. Please share if any or all of these align with where you are. I'd be curious to know where you're coming from. And in short, basically, if you're a social or environmental scientist who wants to publish in a peer reviewed journal, you're in the right place. All right, let's get real. Today, the stakes are higher than ever. We're living in a moment of political upheaval and misinformation, and independent research matters more than ever. This is something I'm really passionate about, and I published a two-part blog last month about bias in academic publishing with the title, Are We Climbing the Academic Tower or Reinforcing the Pipeline of Privilege? I'll put the link in the chat so you can easily find it if you're curious to read it. While this workshop is not designed to address these complicated issues, we are going to address the single most important thing that you can do to make your paper more publishable, and that is articulating your core argument. Note that today it is both easier and more difficult to publish. You know, probably a million journal articles are published every year, and I'm not exaggerating. This is a statistic that I recently looked up. So there are more journals, but also more biased. So let's dive into your core argument. As researchers, we're constantly building on what came before us, and that means that no idea is original. Unfortunately, someone has already published on your topic. And I like this quote by Mark Twain that there's no such thing as an original idea. We simply take a lot of old ideas, put them into a sort of mental kaleidoscope. What really matters is what you're bringing to the conversation that is new. You're embedding yourself into a topic that's already been well established, but you're offering one of three things. You're either confirming what has already been published, you're extending what's already been published, or you're contradicting it. What matters in this case is your one important idea, which is your core argument. An argument is meant to persuade a reader to believe something or to believe it more strongly. In the scientific world, the argument is a single significant idea supported by evidence. You should be able to state it in one or two clear sentences, and it emerges from or is linked to some other scholarly discourse. A lack of a core argument is probably the main reason that journal papers get rejected. And I know I'm repeating myself, but this is a really important one. It is the single most important thing you can do. So state your argument clearly and early in your paper and then structure everything else around it. Okay, so let's get into the first exercise. That is turning your research question into a claim. And this is a shortcut to developing an argument. And it's by starting with your hypothesis or your assumption. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit of this. So, not all research starts with or is based on a hypothesis. Some research starts with an assumption, and this is common in qualitative or mixed method studies. You might not have an explicit assumption, but now is the time to articulate the implied assumption or assumptions that motivated your research project, your questions, or your general logic. Now, I'm not talking about an assumption as something you believe to be true, but rather an assumption that is a statement of your prediction of the unknown relationship between the two variables, concepts, or phenomena that were under study in your project. So if you take your hypothesis or your assumption, you now have a claim and the logic behind it. and this is the first part of building an argument. The argument then becomes your claim supported by the evidence resulting from a test of your hypothesis or assumption. So, an argument, therefore, is your claim plus the logic behind it plus the evidence supporting it. So, let's take it step by step, starting with what claim does your research make? This will be the first writing prompt, and I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. So, go ahead and do a little brainstorming. Ultimately, you want to be able to state your claim in 1 or 2 sentences. Be specific. Extend any vague words like important or significant. Some starters could be I argue that, or this paper demonstrates that, or my findings suggest that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause here and give you 5 minutes to go ahead and do a little brainstorming on your claim. Okay, let's reconvene and move on to the next part, which is building your argument. Okay, so we've talked about the claim, which tries to answer what do you want your reader to believe? Now we're going to build even further and talk about your reason. Why should the reader agree with you? And it's usually a because statement. And then start to think about the evidence. What out there demonstrates that your claim is true? Reasons answer why your claim matters, and evidence answers what out there proves it is true. They aren't the same. Reason is your logic, and evidence is your proof. Remember, research is meant to confirm, extend, or contradict what already exists. So we're going to move on to writing prompt number 2. Again, give you about 5 minutes. And the question is, why does your claim matter and what proves it? Think of it this way. The evidence that you'll report in your results or findings section is what should be supporting your claim. I want you to make a list of 2, 3, or 4 pieces of evidence that support your claim. Sometimes I find that when I list out the evidence, however, it starts to point towards more than one claim. This is great, actually. This means you potentially have 2 papers. Select the evidence that directly supports the claim that you're developing right now. Another issue that you might find when you start to make a list of your evidence is that it points towards a slightly different claim. This is also fine. Just refine your claim. This exercise is meant to save you loads of time because generally, when you write out your results section in your paper without a clear argument, you often find a mismatch. So, being clear on a claim and evidence now will save you time later. So, why does your claim matter and what proves it? What is your reason? Because dot dot dot. And your key pieces of evidence. Keep them separate. So, the reason is why it is significant. And the evidence is what out there, which is your research results, what results demonstrate that it is true. So I'll give about 5 minutes and then we'll come back together. Okay, that's about 5 minutes, and you might not be completely finished with this exercise, but you can always come back later. Let's continue moving on and start to strengthen your argument. It's time to think about counter arguments and also establish a warrant. So, first of all, acknowledging counter arguments. I want you to imagine a skeptical reader. What will they push back on? I want you to anticipate it and answer it. It's really important to think about weaknesses and counter arguments against your argument. And acknowledging these will really strengthen your argument. Readers already know the other research, they already know the counter arguments. So by acknowledging them, acknowledging those counter arguments, you actually make your argument stronger. You also want to establish a warrant. Warrant is an argument in a warrant in an argument is really the underlying, often unstated assumption or logical connection that connects your evidence, which is your data, to your claim. It explains why the evidence supports the claim. It acts as a sort of bridge that proves the evidence is relevant. Warrants are essential to persuade an audience that the evidence provided is valid and sufficient. So ask yourself, why do your reasons justify your claims? State the general principle that links them. I know this is a little vague, and I'll get to an example in just 1 second. But the basic pattern is when a general condition exists, then a general consequence follows. So, what does that look like? Here is a really simple example. It's Saturday, so I should water my plants. Okay, well, this is a claim. I should water my plants and a reason. It's Saturday, but we don't quite see the logic, and that's why we need a warrant here. When we add a warrant, the example becomes my plants need to be watered weekly, and I work during the week. And I often have personal obligations on Sunday. Therefore, Saturday is the only day I'm free to water my plants. This becomes the warrant. Now it's your turn. Writing prompt number 3. Again, about 5 minutes to answer the question, what is your underlying assumption? What is your warrant? What links your reason to your claim? Is it implied or will you need to make it explicit? Oftentimes, it can be implied, but in some cases, you might want to explain exactly to the reader why you're linking your reason to your claim. So again, it's when a general condition exists, then a general consequence follows. So go ahead and take about 5 minutes and think about what is your underlying assumption? What is your warrant? All right, let's move on to the last part, developing your core argument. And that's answering the all important so what? No reader should ever be left asking, so what? You want to state the value of your argument. You want to answer why does it matter? This is where you reference the research gap and why your research is useful, worthwhile, or significant to fill the gap. Just because there's an area of research that hasn't been investigated doesn't mean it needs to be. Just because there's a gap doesn't mean it needs to be filled. Again, there are three ways that you might be filling this gap. You might be confirming, you might be extending, or you might be contradicting the published research. So make that clear. Make it clear what is the gap you're filling and why does it matter? And while you could ask yourself many, many different ways the so what question, here are three ways that you can ask it. First, the first so what should be related to your specific contribution. What specifically are you contributing with this research? Then, once you answer that, you want to go a little deeper. Okay, but so what? What are the broader field or disciplinary contributions? Then, most broadly, you want to say, really, so what? What is the widest significance of your study? So, again, so what? What is your specific contribution? Okay, but so what? Your broader field or discipline? And then, really, so what? What is the widest significance? So, for this last writing prompt, you want to apply the so what test to your argument. So what specifically? So what disciplinarily or in your broader field? And then so what most generally in the broader context? Why does your argument matter beyond your data? And as you start to answer this, you also want to think about, are you taking a stand with this argument? Could someone disagree with you? Are you going beyond observation? Are you avoiding speculation? Are you staying grounded in your evidence? If you can answer yes to all four of those, then you are on track to developing a strong argument. So let's take about 5 minutes so that you can apply the so what test. Okay, now that you've done some deep thinking about your core argument, we'll move on to the last part. Um, there's no one way to actually write a core argument, but here are two templates that can be useful. The first one is kind of a standard template where you would structure your core argument as something like, while scholars debate, argue, ignore the situation, I argue, demonstrate, suggest that this is happening. This is based on my method of this. Template B is a contesting view, and this is one that I use quite often when I'm developing a paper, and the structure goes like this. Although a general statement or opposite view is happening, nevertheless, I make my claim because of these examples and these pieces of evidence. All right. Lastly, here are some examples of core arguments across a variety of disciplines, just to give you a sense of what it could look like. So the first example is we argue that cryptocurrencies have the capacity to create potential niches for economic survival, while at the same time reproducing conditions of vulnerability and inequity in the long run. Another example is we make the case that lasting transformative change in agri-food systems requires fostering an enabling environment for equality, empowerment, and transformation. Another one example is we see rural men resisting exploitation in specific jobs without rejecting society's fundamental evaluation of the importance of the work. And a last example, again, these are not comprehensive. There are many, many examples. Last example is we argue that even when participants understood antibiotic resistance and were willing to adjust their practices, there were cultural and structural challenges, demotivating changes. So notice that each of these takes a stand, it can be disagreed with, and it goes beyond simply describing the results. So each of these, in their own way, are examples of strong arguments. Okay, moving on to next steps. I want to encourage you to continue to refine your core argument. And as you get a little bit more clear about the evidence that's supporting it, you may find that it shifts a little bit. Please use the template that I uploaded in the chat. Let me know if you have any issue accessing that. The From Question to Claim framework is uploaded there. I'll also send it out in the follow-up email. But as you uh, as you start to finalize, it may be time for you to move into drafting your paper. So here are some next steps that I recommend just to keep you moving along. First of all, writing your abstract. I know it's common to wait until you're finished writing your paper to write the abstract as a summary statement, but I actually find that if you write it before you even start writing your paper, then it can provide a really clear roadmap. And I offer a free 5-day challenge to write your abstract and get clear on your core argument. So that may make sense to you. You can find that on the Publish It website. And it walks you through day by day with a mini, like 3-minute video in developing your abstract. Another thing that you might move on to are outlining your paper or focusing on the structure. So for the outline, I suggest that you find 2 or 3 model papers in your field published recently. These would be broader than but related to your topic. So you're not reading as a researcher, you're reading to find good examples of a similar paper, a model paper that shows a strong introduction, similar methods, maybe a similar subject or context. It's not just what is written, but how it's written. And if you already have a sense of what journal or uh, several journals that you're thinking about targeting, look for model papers in those journals themselves because these papers will be structured in a way that you'll want to emulate. Another thing to think about is structure. So this is another really important aspect of a journal paper that doesn't get taught. So contents, introduction, methods, results, discussion, those are the obvious parts, but the structure is less tangible. This is really what makes your whole paper hang together. And your core argument is your organizing guide. Think of your paper as a hierarchy of main sections, then subsections, and paragraphs. And each of these should relate to your core argument with nothing tangential. Papers are not linear. They're not meant to be written as A, then B, then C, and therefore D. That is a research report. Papers are meant to be argumentative, and that's why we start with a core argument. It's D. And then the reasons for D are your evidence, A, B, and C. And then that's why D. So your core argument becomes the linchpin around which everything else is organized. Another thing that I'd like to talk about is, next steps could be practical, or they could be even just about your writing habits. So some people struggle with creating a consistent writing habit, and I'd encourage you to check out my blog titled Why Don't You Just Write? I list more than a dozen potential ways that you might get over if you have some sort of block to writing, different things that you could try out. Or you might struggle once you actually sit down. So you don't have any problem sitting down in front of your computer, but the pressure of writing the first sentence really keeps you from moving forward. And I also have a blog about that I talk about writing as an iterative rather than a linear process, and removing the pressure of starting with the first sentence and really figuring out where you want to dive in at any point of the paper and building it out from there. Or you might find that you have too many ideas. So, if that's the case, check out my blog on Salami Publishing, which is about writing multiple papers from one research project. There are these and then many more in the Publish It website. I publish a blog post every month and talk about different aspects of the writing process. So go ahead and check that out. Okay, so we have come to the end of the presentation, and you now have a core argument, and I want you to use it to guide your writing. The recording in the worksheet, the from question to claim framework, will be sent to you in the next couple of hours. And really, I just want you to know that I'm here to support you. I offer a free 30 minutes consultation to talk about your unique situation, see if we can find some kind of quick wins. My 30 minutes consultation is never a sales call. It's really just to get to know you and to see how I can help you in moving forward. I offer a lot of resources, so it's a way to see what would be a good fit for you. Finally, look for your inbox because I do have a special offer, 50% off Draft It, my essential 10-week workshop. It's a self-paced tutorial to draft your journal paper from abstract to conclusion. It builds directly on what we've done in this workshop. It's the same framework, but with more depth, and it goes at your pace. It's not a how to write this paper. It's really a deep dive on how to structure and write all papers. It covers topics including, of course, how to structure your paper, articulating your core argument, but also writing and refining your introduction and literature review, some basic contents and organization, but also concluding and finishing it so that you can get it out the door. It goes beyond the standard IMRAD sections, which is IMRAD stands for Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. Draft It is really meant to help you tackle the two most fundamental, essential, critical elements of what elevate a research report into a publishable journal paper. A clearly articulated core argument, which we've done a little bit of that here, but there's a much more extensive tutorial within this workshop, within the drafted workshop, as well as creating a structure that supports your entire paper. So if you're ready to publish it, I encourage you to register for Draft It. You'll have unlimited access. You can start anytime, now, next month, or next year. Or if you're ready for one-on-one feedback, I also have another offer, but go ahead and check your email. I won't get into it here. I do want to make a note that I offer pricing parity for those in low and middle income countries. Shoot me an email with your country and I'll send you a unique code. The discount will apply on top of that. I truly believe that your voice matters, and I'm here to help you figure out what your unique challenges are in getting published. But of course, in order to do this work, I also have to pay my bills. So that's why I offer both free and paid services. So figure out what works for you on your journey. And then finally, I want to encourage you to join the free watering hole, which is a community discussion board on the Publish It website. It's a supportive space where academics at all stages, from new grad students to seasoned researchers, can really ask questions, share advice, navigate the publishing journey together. And also remember, I'm always available if you need some motivation. All right, I'm going to ask if there are any final questions or comments. And if there aren't, then I just wanted to say I'm thinking of running another free workshop next month, and I'm brainstorming ideas. So some of those things that I was thinking about, maybe a free workshop on organizing the literature review, dealing with reviewer comments, selecting a journal, and I'm also open to other topics. So let me know what your thoughts are. And in the next coming weeks, I will make a decision and shoot out an email and invite you. I want to thank you sincerely for joining this workshop. I really hope it was useful. Please check out my blog and YouTube videos of publishing your research in a peer-reviewed journal. I add new content every month. And finally, each of you truly are my motivation for doing this work. So I wish you inspired writing. Thank you.